All right. Hello, I'm John Meister from Super Soul. We're a game studio here in Lexington. We make all kinds of different games, but today I'm going to talk about making console games. So specifically, how to get your game on PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, what's kind of involved in that process. So currently we're working on Piggy Ball, and we just got to announce yesterday that we're coming to the Switch as well. So coming to all three consoles a little bit later this year. Kind of working on the last steps to go through that process. So it's I'd like to share kind of what we've learned and just kind of an overview of the overall process, so you can kind of see if maybe getting your game on consoles is what you want to do. So I wanted to kind of cover that overall process, talk about kind of porting your game to the console, what's involved there, the other step of kind of game certification, so getting the game approved to be released by the console makers, and then kind of specific steps for each of the consoles to become and apply for being a developer. So, all right, so basically it's gotten a lot easier. So it used to be pretty difficult for an independent developer to release a game on consoles. You most of the time had to have like a publisher, but now all the major consoles support self-publishing. Just like sort of the App Store or Steam, you can create a game, release it on their storefront, and release digitally. Physical release, through discs or some other media is a little more complicated. There tends to be, having to pay for that those discs up front, and there's more restrictions and limitations. But self-publishing for the digital storefront is much easier, I guess. It's maybe not easy, but it's much easier than it used to be. There's not as much kind of red tape there. So consoles, though, are definitely a closed platform, so it's not like you can just put anything on it. They have sort of walled-off garden where they've got restrictions on network connections and how you can access things, and what can run on their systems and all that. So you basically have to get approval for your app and also getting approved as a developer. So they get to review kind of your concept and say whether they like it or not. And usually it's good to have some kind of playable or video at least, so that they can know what your game is about and know whether it's sort of the quality that they want for the consoles. You're going to need to sign legal agreements with them, getting access to their technology and getting hardware and things. So you're kind of doing some of that, say, with the App Store, but there's a little bit more paperwork for consoles. You get access to hardware and software when you get approved, and the game, like I said, goes through tests and gets certified. This kind of goes back to in the 80s, where they had sort of counterfeit or non-official NES games that were released for hardware. Now they have sort of encryption and things to prevent something to run on a console before it gets approved by them. So they basically sell the game. They sell a license to a customer. So you're kind of giving them the authority to sell licenses, and then they pay you a royalty for that. So that makes it really nice and easy. They take care of all the sales tax and all the different logistics for where they sell and license the game, and you just get a royalty payment for each of the games that you sell. There is sort of the downside of that is there is a delay. So it's usually they're paying quarterly, so there's a delay of several months before you would get money from console sales. But they take care of a lot of the work. Let's see. So when you apply, you basically are applying to publish a particular game. So you're that first game that you've released on a particular console, you're asking to publish that particular game. And then you also kind of get, once your game is approved, then they approve you as a developer, and you can start using their services and tools and things. So to get approved, once you've submitted and they like what they see, they have you sign a non-disclosure agreement. So this is an agreement that says, hey, we won't talk about how this stuff works, and we won't talk about the business arrangements, and it's all kind of confidential. So I'm not going to be. We'll see how much I can talk about and answer questions, but you basically can't talk about a lot of the details about how things work. But they kind of talked about some of the details, and that's what I'm going to share tonight. So the other thing is, you sign that licensing agreement with them, so they're working to sell the licenses of your game, and then again, they set up royalty payments, which checking account does it go to, that kind of thing. And my recommendation is that you do this as a business. I just probably wouldn't. I would recommend not releasing a game just by yourself. Because if there's any kind of, if somebody wants to sue you, if you release it as a business, then they're suing the business and not you personally. So there's kind of, nice legal reasons to protect yourself to set up a company. So in Kentucky, it's pretty easy to set up an LLC. So an LLC is a sort of a pass-through entity where you take in money and profits, and then that just goes to the people that own the business, and so it becomes regular income tax. So it's kind of a pass-through the funds. So you don't actually have to pay taxes as the business or the LLC. You're just kind of passing through that income and expenses to the actual person who owns the company. So it's only $40 to register a company here, especially if it's like solo, a single person. That's pretty easy to do. You go to the Secretary of State website and you can fill it out online. If you're more than one person, I would definitely have agreements there about how the business is run and who owns what and all that. So you do have to do some more paperwork and potentially pay extra taxes. So you have to file like an annual report with the Secretary of State. Depending on where the business is located, like here in Lexington, we have to pay local, county, city tax. There's reporting that you have to do to say how much we brought in as a business. Once you kind of set up that LLC in Kentucky, then you register with the IRS to get your federal employer identification number. So that's your kind of your Social Security number for your business. And that's what you use to kind of register with all these companies. And some of them will let you release as an individual, and you would use your Social Security number, and it would get reported as income to you. But like I said, there's just some protection that you get by setting up a company. So the software and hardware that you get access to the developer website for the particular console that you're working on. So you get access to Sony's developer portal, and then you get access to, from there you can download the software tools and the SDK for developing on that platform. And a lot of them have these, the tools for particular game engines. So, on Sony's site, you can get access to the Unity add-ons and things that you need for developing for the consoles. Again, because it's sort of proprietary, you can't just can't even go to Unity directly. You have to kind of go through PlayStation and Xbox to kind of get access to the tools for making something on Unity work on consoles. You can also order dev kits through the portal. So you're gonna say this is where you need to ship the dev kit, and there's usually different types of dev kits. Some that are for testing and some for development. Along with that, there's a lot of documentation that you're going to find on the site, and a lot of times it's specific even to the particular engine that you're using. So there's Unity documentation on these sites, and there's all kinds of they do webinars and kind of conferences and things, so you can watch videos and kind of confidential videos about how the system works and how maybe they get their game to run really well on particular hardware, or even maybe previewing future features and things before they're announced to anybody else. So maybe we'll learn about the next generation of consoles soon. So the dev kit is basically a specialized version of the console. So it has some extra hardware usually. So maybe it has extra memory or hard drive space or networking capabilities. And usually that's to help you develop the game. So if maybe your game at first uses a lot of memory, it won't crash, but you can get it down to within limits, and then you can try it, on regular consoles. So they kind of add extra hardware features. It lets you run those uncertified games. So when you're making your game, it hasn't been tested and certified. So it allows you to run those types of software without having, to build anything like on a disk or something. And so that allows you to test and see if it's going to work. You also can connect to this through your PC is the main process. So you're connecting from your computer that has like Unity and other development tools to connect to that development kit. And you kind of copy over to the dev kit to run the game, to debug, capture like video. You can kind of connect to it and see what's going on when you're developing your game. So let's talk about maybe Unity. So Unity has a lot of different platforms that it supports, and they support for a while sort of the major consoles. To get your game to run sort of the Unity add-ons for the different platforms, you have to get a Unity license specifically for that platform. And generally they're now free for indie developers. So Nintendo and Sony and Microsoft all kind of realized to get people that are, all these developers making stuff in Unity, they'll kind of license the engine for you, and then you get a key through them. So once you get that license key, then you can apply it in Unity, and it unlocks certain features. Yeah.
This is after you've done, after you've gotten the
Yeah.
and the dev kit.
Yeah. So this is, again, after you've signed all those NDAs and agreements, then they are able to give you access to the licenses and stuff. And then each console is slightly different how you go about getting the license. There's different steps, but essentially, so through the console maker, then you get access to a license key that you can use to turn Unity on to let you export to the consoles. And along with that is sort of this download that it's an add-on, so you can see sort of here in the the build settings, you've got all these different platforms. And if you've ever tried to pick the Xbox One or PS4, usually it says, hey, you don't have the right license for this. But those things become available when you apply your license and add the installs. So essentially, it's just an add-on to the same Unity that you have already. It's just got extra tools that get added in. So when you're porting your game, I guess I would probably recommend, maybe if you haven't done it before, maybe do a Steam release, or at least itch and Steam are pretty easy to get release your game on. So you can get some practice, with a Steam release, and kind of see what's involved. So that's maybe one recommendation. But once you get sort of your game up and running on the PC, then most of the work is done for you on the consoles. So again, Unity does a really good job of getting their game engine to run really nicely on the different platforms. So the same feature most of the time that's on your PC will have that feature, that type of shader or effect or whatever. It basically works the same on consoles. Maybe the performance is different. Maybe you can't have as many particles as you could on a PC. But essentially, it's running very similar. And sometimes it actually, you can take advantage of specialized hardware in the consoles to run even better. So, but most of the work there is in getting it up and running is done by the game engine teams. So I don't have much experience sort of running from scratch with like C++ or something, but it used to be you had to do a lot of work to get it to work. So some of the differences are of how you save and load data. So normally you're just dealing with files on the PC, where you're just reading and writing from files. There's definitely more restrictions on getting data and writing data to the hardware. It's not just, you have Windows that's taking care of the files and everything. In these consoles, they have different versions of different operating systems, essentially. And so accessing data, reading and writing has different limitations, and it works differently. One of the things there is maybe to think it's more asynchronous. So you say, I want to go get this file, and then you have to wait, and then it might get you data back. So so you might want to kind of plan ahead to have where you're maybe abstracting your data access so that you can kind of swap out some code easily for different access to the file system. Performance is also likely an issue because these consoles are essentially low-end PCs. It's amazing, like Piggy Ball, we use a lot of CPU just because the way we kind of structured it in its history. So like a laptop processor is actually sometimes a lot faster than the console processors, and that's mainly because on consoles you have like multiple processors, and Unity at this point doesn't take advantage of all those processors. So essentially you're getting maybe like one or two processors that are running it instead of a really nice PC-based processor. So you definitely have to kind of think, test it and see what it's like to see what you need to adjust to get it to run well. But they're definitely working on all kinds of new stuff with like Unity 2019 that adds multi-threading and all that kind of stuff with the job systems. So the other things you want to think about is how you're going to integrate sort of the platform services. So there's like achievements and trophies. So those are required by the game to be released. You have to have those, and so you have to figure out some way that you're going to give out those. You have to kind of plan, there's points that you get for those. You have to figure out how you're going to do that. So if you're releasing on Steam, they have achievements in there, so you can kind of set that up and get that working just by using Steam, and then it's essentially you're doing something similar on the consoles to say, hey, they got this achievement, they just finished this level, that kind of thing. Other things like leaderboards, friends, stats, the status, I guess this is kind of like, so people can tell what you're doing online, so your friends can say, oh yeah, you're playing, Piggy Ball, or mostly for multiplayer games, you can say, oh, they're playing this game, you could invite a friend and join you and play online together. So those are all features you can take advantage of, and you definitely should. And this is all kind of more common between all the consoles, but you could, there's even like specialized hardware, so like the Switch in particular kind of has, like the different Joy-Cons, they work and have different features like motion controls and things. So, the platform developers definitely want you to, use special features that are specific to their platform. So, so maybe one strategy is to like develop and release your game on one console at a time, sort of taking advantage of the different features. That's a pretty common approach. So again, Unity, when you run it and you just kind of switched over to the different platforms, it runs, and it's essentially running the PC version on the editor. So what you have to do is deploy that build over to those devices, and that can take a while. So that's definitely something to think about. I would recommend you work mostly on the PC and get it working, because you can easily like debug basic stuff, and then it can take a while to actually compile and package things up and go get it deployed to the different consoles. So that can definitely slow down development if you're kind of doing everything on the consoles. Probably best to work mostly on the PC. And then once you deploy to the consoles, you can hook up the profiler and debugger, so you can use the Unity performance profiler and kind of see how things are running and get information there about what's taking time to render or to process. And then you can hook up the debugger to catch exceptions and breakpoints and things. So we can talk about kind of certification. So this is the more details about what they want for the game. So basically certification is this process to make sure it meets the technical and content requirements that they have. And different consoles have different requirements, but in general they want a good game, a good experience. And really they're not testing and certification whether it's a good game, I guess, in terms of is it fun or not. It's more about does it not crash, does it not corrupt their save game, does it maybe if you spam like connecting to the network a bunch, that could impact other people. So there's all those kind of technical things that it wants you to make sure to do, kind of be a good game to the whole system and not do some things that are bad. And so they'll check specific how do you handle errors, what happens if you say if you're connecting to leaderboards and you get disconnected, what happens when you need to show an error, what happens when a controller battery dies and gets disconnected, can you resume the game if you connect another controller. So there's those kind of things that you have to deal with, and they get really specific about here's the test and all the steps to go through, and you can just read all those and you just do those steps and make sure that your game responds correctly. There's also sort of content restrictions, so images specific. So like if you have button images, like press the X button, it should look like the appropriate image for that console. They have examples and everything to show you what's acceptable, how the button should look, and they're pretty specific, because they want it to be a consistent kind of experience for all players on their platform. There's kind of like terms and trademarks, so like you can only use certain terms, like vibration, I think, is what they like instead of rumble, because I think Nintendo is rumble, right? And so the others are vibration. And then trademarks, like you need to put the trademark symbols. I mean, if you say PlayStation, you need to say the right thing. Needs to be kind of all the logos are specific. So you can get to kind of like how loud is the game, the volume levels, and they give you all the tools sort of to check these things. But it's kind of pretty specific because they want it, from all this experience of other games, they want to make sure that you're doing things correctly. And then so the store content is another part. So you have to put up screenshots and video, and you have to have certain format. You have to have certain text to describe the game, and most of them want you or require you to translate that into multiple languages. So your game could be all in English, but if you're gonna sell it in Japan, they want it in Japanese in the store to describe the game. And certain countries, I think I think Japan is, in general, they want the game sort of localized in Japanese, where you can release the game in English, in Europe and Asia and or North America, South America, kind of. So that's just something to kind of think about. Age ratings is another requirement, so you have to get a rating for the appropriate country that you're in. It used to be you had to go to like all the different ones, so there's ESRB and PEGI is for Europe and ESRB is in US. And you used to have to go do all those separately and they would charge you money. So now I think all the consoles support this International Age Rating Coalition, so it's a pretty streamlined process of filling out details about what the content that's in your game, sort of self-reporting what's in there, and then it kind of spits out all the different age ratings, and they just flow nicely on their systems into the different console stores. So it's pretty easy, and this has only kind of been in the last few months that a lot of them have gotten support for this. So, and that's what's nice about that for an indie is that it's a free rating. You don't have to pay for, it used to be you had to pay for PEGI ratings and things. So, this is for, again, digital games. If you're physical, I think you may have to pay for ratings, but yeah. All right, so I was going to put up on our website, so supersoul.co/game-resources or game-dev-resources. We're going to put some links to. There's several talks by people that are doing like making games for the different platforms in Unity that we've watched or I've watched for resources, and then there's some talks about like technical things that you can think about. But I'll go really quickly here about specifics for each of the consoles and how to get started and apply. So for Microsoft, they have a program called ID at Xbox. It's their indie publishing program. So you just go to this website and you can apply and start, there's apply now button, and you start filling out information about you or your company. You can apply I'm pretty sure you can apply as an individual if you wanted. What's nice with their program is you get 2 free dev kits. You don't have to pay for those. Just everybody in the program gets that. And they kind of have a team of indie-friendly staff that help you through the certification and getting approval and all those kind of things. They have a simplified process, which was the Creators Program. It essentially takes your you can take a regular Xbox or Xbox One and turn it into a dev kit, and then Unity supports exporting to that format. It's sort of the same format that goes in the Windows Store. It's I forget the name of it, but it's a special type of application. You can't do things like achievements, or a lot of the services aren't allowed, but you can kind of get it running. It doesn't give you all the access. There's basically limitations, so you don't get all the access to memory and things. I would kind of, if you're serious about getting on console, I would probably recommend to just go through the application process, because if you're serious about it, then they'll approve you and you can get access to the full hardware and get all the features that Unity supports anyway. So if you're just kind of testing something and wanting to get it out there, you could definitely do the Creators Program. Okay, so Nintendo, again, you can go to this register link. You can publish as an individual, but they don't give you any dev kits, or generally. I think you can, if your game is really, looks really good and cool, and you can talk to people at Nintendo and kind of say, hey, can I get a free dev kit? They may give you one. But theirs are pretty reasonable. They've released a dollar point of $450 for a dev kit for the Nintendo Switch. So, much cheaper than in past. They said, I forget how many, like a fourth or a fifth of the price for the other ones in the past. So, in the Wii U or the 3DS or something. So, anyway, so that's maybe not a free dev kit, but it's definitely cheaper, more reasonable for an indie developer. And it's the same program as every other developer, so you're working with the same kind of staff. Again, it's kind of more like you send an email to a group email and you get some help and feedback, so there's not necessarily one-on-one help, but they used to require that you have an office, and there were some other restrictions, but basically you don't have any of those anymore. You can, you just have to have kind of a approved game, and you get access, and you can release your games on there. Nintendo is pretty, at least in the past, has been pretty picky. They really have been trying to curate the store and limit who can get on. But I think the people that I've talked to, more people are getting access, more indies are getting access to the dev kits. So I don't have the email on here, but there's an email address that you essentially send. You can send your kind of information about your game, like maybe a press kit or design document, YouTube videos, or playable, and they kind of approve that, and that's how you get it added. When you register, I think you get access immediately to, like, if you want to make a Wii U game or a 3DS game, you can kind of just get access immediately once they approve you. But to get the actual Switch dev kits and get approved for that, you have to kind of submit your particular game. And then Sony, so this is their partner site. And again, you go on there and you register or apply to be a developer and submit your game. So they have more restrictions. So they require you to be a business. You have to be in the U.S. and have your federal number. They also have requirements sort of on networking and stuff. So you have to have a static IP, which not everybody has a guaranteed static IP, and so that's maybe, like, I think it's $10 more a month for our internet to have that static IP. So it's not too bad, but it's because when you're accessing things, they want to know it's you and not someone else. And a lot of, it's kind of like with these dev kits, there's sort of this activation process, so they know that it's you who's going to use this dev kit and not somebody else. So they require you to have an IP address that's static. There is a possibility, I've heard of other people kind of using VPN services to get a static IP when you access things, but the other requirement is you have a non-public email, so like they don't want you to have @Gmail or something. They want you to have like us, John at supersoul.co instead of John at Gmail. And I'm not exactly sure why that is. I think that's more maybe when you're like having support issues or something like that, customers can kind of directly contact a business and not be sort of, I guess maybe more professional, I think. And then again, kind of, you can potentially get free dev kits, again, talking with your account manager. So one thing for them is that they actually assign you a particular person that's your account manager, and if you haven't gotten an answer somewhere else, you can kind of contact them and say, hey, I need a dev kit, or how do I do this? How do I get a Unity license or whatever? And so you can talk to them, and especially if you have a playable version of the game, all these places would love to like play them and give you feedback, and especially if you're trying to apply to be one of the developers. So I think that's about it for them. So I guess that's it. Feel free to email me if you have more questions. I can answer more now if anybody has any. Oh, yeah. So like I said, there are particular things you should keep in mind when you're developing if you're planning to go to the different consoles. So what's interesting is that sort of Nintendo Switch is more of like a mobile device. It's like a tablet. So we actually kind of ran our game on mobile devices to kind of see how it was before we even got a dev kit. But it has, it's better than just a regular tablet. But so that's kind of one thing to keep in mind. There's less memory and things like on the Switch versus PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. They all are sort of essentially PC-based kind of things. They used to be, like the PlayStation 3 had the Cell processor and was sort of a really unique hardware. They've all kind of standardized into this kind of like a PC-based thing, which makes it easier for developers, ongoing, like it's, there are other things that they offer that make you want to use one console versus another. So it's nice that you can, if you can kind of get it working well on like a low-end PC, then it should work, especially like if you're using something like Unreal or Unity. I guess the thing is, like, if you're thinking about, just how you would architecture the thing, like if you're thinking about, making stuff to work with Steam for achievements and all that stuff, you want to make sure to have all that kind of nice so that you can hook it up for the different systems. What we do is actually, we have just one project. There's one copy of the Unity project, and we just have conditionals in our code that says, oh, now I'm on the Switch version, so I'm going to run this code and exclude this other stuff, and I'm on, the Xbox, I do this. And so that makes it easy for us to kind of just be in one project as we're developing for all the different platforms. I'm trying to think what else. Networking is a little more complicated, I think, potentially. Like there's especially the kind of like setting up and limits about what you can do. Obviously, you have to get approved for like cross-play kind of situations. I'm trying to think what else. Mostly it's just kind of thinking about maybe keeping it like a appropriate hardware. So if you have to have a really big, CPU or graphics card on a PC, it's probably not going to run well on consoles. Yes.
How exactly does that work?
So the question is, how does like an LLC protect you? So if you set up an entity, so like set up a business, then it's sort of treated as the the thing that's actually doing the work and releasing the game. So let's say somebody sues you, like they say, oh, you stole my idea, or your game looks like my game, and so I'm going to sue you. Well, if you release your game as yourself, then they're going to sue you, right, personally. So let's say they win $1 million judgment. Well, then it's you personally who owes $1 million if you release the game. The idea is that if you set up a company, they can sue the company. And so if you have $1 million in the bank in the company, then they can take that. But if not, then you can go bankrupt and the business gets shut down. But then you don't go bankrupt personally because you're not you're not the one who actually released it. It's this other entity, this business that did it. Now, of course, I'm not a lawyer, so there's sort of things where they can potentially get around that if you're acting as a person and not acting as a business. They can do some stuff. But basically, that's the idea, is that you have some protection, especially if you have multiple people involved. Like, you should have like some kind of formal agreement, I think, so that when this money comes in, how does it get split up between people, who gets paid what. There's all those kind of things, and that a business makes it really easy to kind of do those arrangements. If people are actively involved, sort of ongoing things in the future. But so that's kind of like the main idea, is that they have agreements, like the company has an agreement with Sony and not you personally.
So you would do that?
Yes, I would recommend before you kind of release something commercially, publicly, that you do that. Now, if you're doing a game jam, or you're just kind of putting stuff out there to get feedback and learn, then there's probably less likely of you getting sued or something. Maybe they tell you to take down that fan-made Sonic level or something, but they're probably not going to sue you, or there's probably not going to be legal issues there. But once you get into sort of actually commercially putting something on these platforms, and there's money involved in selling the game and taxes and all those kind of things, then it's contracts, and then it just makes sense, I think, to have an entity. And then especially like with Sony, they just require, so they all have their own build process. They are mostly similar. I think I can say that most of them are C++ kind of based things. It's kind of become the standard. Like, funny thing, like Piggy Ball originally was in Java, and then, because Java runs on everything, but most of these console manufacturers have sort of settled on C++. It's become, or has been, the dominant thing, and so they've just kind of simplified a lot of things by saying, it's like C++. And so Unity has kind of done a lot of the work with the build processes and tools. So when you click build, it goes off and is actually connecting and running things, and they've done a lot of work to make it pretty simple compared to doing things. So our first we did a game called Speakeasy for the PlayStation 4, and it was early when PS4 just came out, and there wasn't all the sort of tools, so we ended up like doing a lot of manual stuff, running utilities and tools, software to build our game and get it to run on the console. And so now it's pretty streamlined, so it's similar to just hit, like if you're exporting to Android, it's sort of kind of like that process where Unity has done a lot of stuff under the hood. It's good to kind of understand those. Like they each have subtleties about like how those things work, and then especially like if you're trying to figure out a bug or performance, you've kind of learned that your Unity tools can go only so far, and you end up maybe sometimes using the official tools for each platform to figure out what's going on, or tracking down what's happening, or making changes or something. I would think, yeah, Unity and Unreal are the primary engines, just because they're, in general, the dominant engines. So probably on consoles you see some more, proprietary in-house engines, like especially these larger studios that have kind of their own, they've already built their own engines and things, and they'll just continue to update them to support new consoles. So let's see, I think Unreal, Unity, and GameMaker are the ones that I know of. So GameMaker Studio, the newest one, I think, is the one that works on consoles.
I think the older one does too.
The older one might. I know GameMaker Studio 2 runs on Switch. It's totally Plus.
Yeah, so the older version of GameMaker Studio, I think, worked with some consoles, but I thought only the newest one sort of supports all the new stuff. One of the things is that
I think it's
so
PS4 and Xbox.
What it is that so for each console there's these SDKs, and then there's sort of the version of that. So you have to say version 1 of the console dev kit, right, or console SDK. So then your tools that you use, so the game engine has to be compatible with that version, right? And so they all expire. So it's like they add features and change that. So if you publish a game now, you can use version, say, 3, and then in 6 months you have to use version 4. So your game engine has to be updated to work with now version 4 of the development tools for each console. So that's where we have like multiple versions of Unity in like different reasons. Like maybe the new version of Unity supports this new SDK for the platform. So that's why probably what happened was that there was a new features or requirements for some of these consoles, and then GameMaker decided to just only support that in GameMaker Studio 2 instead of 1. And Unity does that as well. Like I forget, Unity 5.6 I think is only supported on certain consoles, and then 2017 is So they basically are like, if you're wanting to do PS3, you got to use this version, and PS4 you got to use this, and because they can only support so many kind of combinations of development kits or development SDKs. So that's kind of one thing to be, what we did is we basically looked at the different consoles and figured out which version of Unity was common. We used Unity 2017, we started out in 5.6, and then we updated to 2017 for Piggy Ball, and we just kind of figured out which version sort of worked between all the consoles and just stayed on that, or tried to keep them in sync, essentially. So, but it's a little complicated. That's where definitely some people approach is they release one console each, so they can just worry about one version of Unity for that one console, and then later they'll do the next console. So we'll see. I think for marketing and things like that, we wanted to be on all the consoles at once. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah. So from what I understand, again, I'm not a lawyer, but how I understand it is sort of you own a tangible, like once you kind of put something in tangible media, like so kind of once you put it in code or sort of have a painting, you own the copyright on that. So the extra step is then filing that with sort of the Copyright Office. I'm not sure all the details on that process, but basically that gives you extra protection. So if you wanted to sue somebody to say, hey, they're copying my thing, then having it filed with that office allows you to do, it gives you more rights. Again, it's going to be different in other countries, but in the U.S., that's how I understand it. So, so like probably if you're close to copy or to release, like maybe after you're in the process of sending certification, you can file that copyright. You already sort of have the copyright, but it's just kind of formalizing it. Could be good then. Similar thing with like trademarks is once you start to commercially, so what I understand is once you start to commercially use the trademark, there's sort of a countdown clock to get it filed. I think it's like a year in the U.S., but it's different other places. I think the advice that I got was that you should just kind of keep it secret and not use. That's why they use sort of secret code names for projects, because they don't want to talk about the name publicly until they sort of release it commercially. So you'll see a lot of, like, you know how they leak it where somebody saw a trademark, that happens. So they usually, like with Stadia, I think before they announced the Stadia release, the day before they filed like the trademarks or something. And so, yeah. But anyway, so yeah, it's kind of depends on your situation, I guess. But you would probably do the copyright and trademark if you say did it on PC. If you did a Steam release first, and you would probably do it before even those releases. All right. Thanks for sticking it out, staying with us. Feel free to email me or hit us up on social media. Yeah, Piggy Ball should be out pretty soon. So,
It's out now on Steam.
yes, that's true. It's on Steam right now, and then it'll be on consoles. We're going through certification, so it should be soon. Thanks.